Tranquility Walk, April 2nd, 2025, state of the front yard. So we have another tree down in the front yard. This was a white sycamore. It was not doing anything, and it's a weed tree. I mean, it's a highly allergenic. People tend to be allergic to white sycamores, and it was non-native. So I was like, okay, time for it to come down so that I can start planting other things in the area. And as it turns out, it was getting into the water system or something. I was in there going, that's weird. I did call a plumber. They said, as long as your water bills haven't been going up, it's probably fine. But I'm like, okay, I will keep an eye on it. But we planted some more plants along the side this year, so hoping to increase this sidewalk area to get a little bit more. We trimmed off some limbs of the avocado tree, which was also because I was a little bit concerned about the weight of it. Avocado tree, again, is the neighbor's, but since it's on my side, I was able to do that trim. The ribis is very, very happy to have the avocado tree trimmed back. It's sitting there going, yes, I can grow straight now instead of going constantly to one side. I mean, I love my little ribis. I go ahead and keep specifically the ribis sangrium, which is the pink flowering currants. And the reason I like this ribis in particular is the ribises that are currants are all nice and polite little ones. The ribises that are the gooseberry varieties all have little tiny thorns, and I am constantly meandering around and touching my plants and fondling them, so I'm not very happy with little tiny thorns. So I like my pink flowering currant in particular because it's a very polite ribis. All right. When you have a strip that's separated by the sidewalk, you're always in search of what to do with it. The coyote mint is actually thriving pretty well right there. And then it's not native, but doing very well as well. But really happy. That's a salvia microfolia, but the birds all love it, so it's doing well. The coyote mint is doing well, even though this is a highly trafficked area and separated out. So doing well there. Before I switch to the other side, a little note about my Yerba Santa. I love having the Yerba Santa there. It's really hard to find something that will grow nice and tall in between that little section right there. It's doing a great job. I did have to have it propped back. It's flowering right now too, which is really, really cool. So the Yerba Santa is wonderful. I absolutely love it. It does have a little bit of curling problem, a little bit of mold problem sometimes. I mean mildew, not mold. But you know what? It's back here in the corner. Nobody sees it but me. I'm happy, and to have it frame in that little tiny spot is excellent. However, I will note those are all little tiny Yerba Santas. That's the Yerba Santa right there. That's where the Yerba Santa is trying to escape to. I am going to try and have to trim those out, but I wanted to leave them there as a warning and example because, yeah, some things that grow really, really, really well, and it is growing really well, decide they want to escape to other areas to also grow really well right there. So do not get me wrong, I love my Yerba Santa. Be careful of your Yerba Santas. I tried planting another pitcher sage for this area. I was going to plant a Manzanita poppy there, and then I realized the poppies have thorns. Oh my god, oh man. yarrow, not right where the male person deposits the mail while wearing shorts. I'm like, no thorns right there. So, doing pretty well so far. This is its first year. Actually, it's only a few months old, so I'm cautiously optimistic and hoping that will grow well. I want something like the Yerba Santa to branch on the other side, although I have to be careful as well that the male people are still able to get to it. Decisions in gardening. Yeah. So that's my happy shady area, has not changed in multiple years, although the poor sandhill sedge is a little bit older and a little bit more fragile. But I'm happy at having things that, like this little shady area right before the door. And that variety of Douglas iris, the white ones over there, I've decided that my yard does not like yarrow. Every yarrow I've ever planted starts dying after a while. That Sonoma one's doing okay, but it's not doing great. So, coyote mint. You know, my yard likes coyote mints. Let's put more coyote mints up there. Douglas irises, coyote mints, and look at all those hummingbird sage. Speaking of hummingbird sage, oh my gosh. Okay, we weren't speaking of it. We were speaking of it in the backyard. But again, we've got three non-native trees sucking up a lot of water and indirect shade for the most part. But the hummingbird sage loves growing under it. And I'm like, I love you, hummingbird sage, for growing there, because there's not a lot of other things that will grow right there. So hummingbird sage loves to grow. They have the root systems that grow out. We are having a slight war between hummingbird sage and the California fuschia right there. Douglas iris will grow in there, but not continuously. The buckwheat is starting to expand out, and I'm like, okay, go buckwheat. That's about, what, 7-8 years old, and it's been expanding bit by bit. The hummingbird sage is at the point, though, where I am having to start a campaign against hummingbird sage for growing into areas where I don't want the hummingbird sage growing. This is getting a little problematic because I do want other things to be growing here as well, and the hummingbird sage is growing on. Might have to put down a root barrier or just spend a lot of time trimming it out. This is my black sage. I have a lot of sages. I love sage. Sage is wonderful. Salvias smell and they're delightful, and they're just, oh my gosh, I love salvia. But it's in bloom right now. It's doing super well. This is one of the plants planted after the sewer replacement. All those came back really well. Salvia was a new plant, and it said, I like it here. And I'm like, I am delighted that you like it here. So that is a great plant for that area. The penstemon did really well for the first couple of years, and it's not doing so well at the moment. It might just be needing to come back, but I have decided that monkey flowers and penstemons just have to be replaced every couple of years. I mean, some people might be able to keep them around longer than that, but if I want constant penstemons and monkey flowers, I'm just going to have to build it into the budget to replace them every few years. My Serpentine Manzanita is doing excellent. I love that Serpentine Manzanita. It was saved from the great sewer replacement, and it was just flowering a few weeks ago. One little flower left. But, I mean, I really love that Manzanita. That is a great Manzanita. Serpentine Manzanita. It's going to keep getting bigger, so yay. Another change in previous years' recording, I'm not sure if this has gotten recorded yet or not, is I took out the lavender and the rosemary in the front because they were way too bushy, and I needed more natives, and I needed something that could be stepped on for people who are parking right here. I'm like, this is a parking space. You need to be able to get out to it, and the bushes were too bushy. So these are the creeping gray sage bee's bliss, or those two are the creeping gray sage bee's bliss. This guy is a hybrid of a Salvia somnosus and a Melphora, Salvia Mrs. Beard. So it's a hybrid. As you can see, it looks very similar to the bee's bliss, but it's also a half a year older. But it's a little bit greener, a little bit more robust. One of the reasons I planted them like that fairly deliberately is I wanted to see the differences, I wanted to evaluate the differences, and I want other people to see and evaluate the differences, because when you go to the garden nurseries, sometimes all you see are the hybrids, and you know, if hybrid work and if the bees like the hybrids, that's fine. Things hybridize naturally, and if they work for your yard, they will work for your yard. That is another buckwheat. It is supposedly a bush type buckwheat. Specifically, it is a Warner Lyle. It got a little bit choppy. Died off on the inside, springing out on the outside, and growing well on the outskirts. It was gorgeous when it was all green. I'm not entirely sure what to make of it at the moment, but you know, sure, go you, as long as you're still growing. Speaking of manzanitas, this is a different type of manzanita. This is a ground cover bronze mat manzanita. So you can see the difference between, there's lots and lots of varieties of manzanitas. So this is a full bush manzanita that is actually one of the largest varieties of manzanitas. Manzanitas also grow very, very slowly, so it will get larger. This will eventually be tree size. That manzanita right next to it is a ground cover manzanita, the bronze mat manzanita. So I like having two different varieties of manzanitas there for everybody to see, and also to just, manzanitas are cool. I like manzanitas. All right. Speaking of replacement monkey flowers, we have replacement coyote bushes right here to use as ground cover, as erosion control as it's going down. This is a compact white sage, which I've got all white sages in the background. The backyard white sages are regular white sages. This guy is a compact white sage, and I was very, very curious as to what the difference between a compact white sage and a regular white sage would be. So I planted it here in the front yard in a compact area, and I am basically waiting to see what the difference will be as it grows. It is flowering season. I love flowering season. Everything's growing up. I had people hunting for this for me for a long time. Speaking of hybrids, this is a salvia hybrid. It's basically between a couple of different salvias, and it is a desperado. So it is very much like a white sage over there, only this salvia is more of a tall bush. It's going to be a tall, compact bush area, and the flowers are going to be purple. So I am I saw one like this at the Stanford Gardens, Stanford greenhouse area, and I was like, I'm super curious about it. I'm super in love with it. It is a Salvia desperado, and it has survived the year, and it is growing, and I'm really curious. But this is pet project, and I love it, and I'm very curious about it. Mallows. I love mallows, but they have a tendency to grow on me for a couple of years and then die. So I've had 3 desert mallows. Sorry, not desert mallows. These are palmari, mallows, and I've had a branch break right there, and I'm going to have to go trim that. So I planted a new one right there. Basically, I've got that space of the mallows, and they will grow really, really well for a few years, and then they'll die on me, and then I have to get new ones. In the nature, they seed. They seed really, really well. With my compact mulch system down here, they don't actually reseed. The seeds don't get through the mulch very well, so I have to deliberately reseed them. But in nature, apparently, how they keep growing is by reseeding. But I've turned out that I wasn't sure if I was going to like mallows, but I really, really like these mallows, so I'm going to try and keep them growing as much as I can. They don't actually open their flowers anymore. This is as wide open as the flowers really ever get. That's an extreme one. Come on, focus. And they sort of live perpetually half open, which is really very an interesting strategy for a plant. I like it. The hummingbirds like it. Everybody likes it. So that is that plant. There is the buckwheat. We are expanding out the hummingbird sage to the area nothing else will grow. Douglas iris. Planted a new monkey flower, hopefully. Douglas irises are growing out. The spice bush. The spice bush, I'm hoping it will grow out even more in the next week. It loses its leaves over the winter time, so it's just twiggy over the winter time, and it goes ahead and then explodes out to a giant huge bush. And last year it got so top heavy, the branches were like falling into the pathway, and just it was actually, I was like, I'm really worried about it actually having problems in the wind. So we tied it up, and right now it's really obvious that it's tied up. When it leaves out a little bit more, it's not going to be so obvious. That pole and the ties are going to be completely hidden after it leaves out a little bit more. But the spice bush is a really neat bush, other than the fact that it loses all its leaves in the wintertime, which, okay, that's a pretty common thing to happen, but you do have to plan for it as well, because that's an open spot for the year. These are island snapdragons, which, okay, are not native. These are native to Catalina Island, so I think Catalina. Ooh, sorry, you don't want to look at my fingers. Snapdragon, snap. Okay, come on. Just try and record while you're doing a snap. All right, snapdragons. I love snapdragons. Hummingbirds love snapdragons too, and so they just add a little bit of extra color and vibrancy and prettiness. That is the large variety of sagebrush. So large sagebrush actually gets trimmed back every year and then grows out again. I love sagebrush. Wonderful smell. You don't see them in the gardens too much. I actually love them. So they're in my gardens, but I will say they're a little bit of a difficult plant if you don't keep them trimmed back. So keep them trimmed back, let them regrow each year, and yeah, that is what happens when the branches break. So I obviously have to come out and trim a little bit more. Ouch. Okay, that's a thorn. Okay, it is not thorn. They are not thorny. I just got a little twig on my hand, but they are not thorny. That was a misspeak. All right, right next to it is a plant you will not see in gardens very often. This is a lavender, desert lavender. This is a Hyptis emery, desert lavender. So when I was first doing it, the people working on designing the garden for me knew that I loved lavenders, and so sourced this one out for me. This is actually a California native. It is, as the title says, desert lavender, and it's got that title partially because of the lavender flowers here. Little itty bitty flowers. Come on, focus, dang you. It's got little, and also, speaking of the sniff stone, it smells like lavender. I mean, I'm always amazed at how plants can develop so far away from each other and have some similar properties and smells, and this is just wonderful. I love having the desert lavender right there. It's taken 8 years or so to grow up this high. They don't grow very quickly, but grows very well in my yard. All right, we've got sea cliff buckwheats that were not doing so well, but have started reviving. But as with a lot of buckwheats, they get a little bit fugly when they're sort of in mid-molt stage. This is not natural for them, but don't put them out on your showcase area just because they will do that. I have put a St. Catherine's lace behind them, which is a giant buckwheat, which will get very, very huge. I do expect it to crowd out the sea cliff buckwheats, but the sea cliff buckwheats, honestly, they are 8 years old and they've had their ups and downs over the years, so this may not be the best location for them. So the St. Catherine's lace giant buckwheat will probably do very well. We've got another mallow. I've decided I like mallows. They don't smell, but they've got character. That was not actually what I planned to plant right there, but you know, it's doing really, really well, and we will do other plants later. This is a variety of a sagebrush. So that's the natural sagebrush over there. This is a gray sagebrush. It's a Montera, so it's a variation. So it's not a hybrid, but it is a variation of a Montera, and I really, really like it, except see all this really nice gray ground molding, excellent path. If it dies out on the inside, it dies out on the inside, and then you're left with these big gaping holes. It's starting to regrow a little bit right there, and I'm like keeping an eye out to see, but I actually gave up on the spot right there and planted a coyote bush to cover the gap. And I will note, okay, when you have other people helping you, you need to be a little bit careful about being specific as to what you're going to be planting where. So this was dwarf coyote, compact coyote bush here. There was supposed to be a dwarf compact coyote bush where the regular coyote bush is. And then the regular coyote bush was supposed to be where the island snapdragon is, and then the island snapdragon is supposed to be where the palmari was. Sorry, that's not palmari, that's a different mallow. But instructions got mixed up somewhere along the way, and the dwarf coyote bush got planted in even closer than I had intended it to be. And I'm kind of throwing up my hands. I mean, I could have fixed that immediately after, but I'm also like, I'm a little bit curious as to what's happening. Plus the Montera California sagebrush is dying off in various areas, and having the compact coyote bush there ready to step in and take over might be a good thing. So I'm leaving that, I left that miscommunication open, and just said, we'll see what'll happen. I'm not opposed in gardening to just see what happens. Gardening's for me a big experiment anyhow, and seeing what works and what doesn't in various areas. So yeah, I'm curious as to what will happen right there. Speaking of mallows, okay, and speaking of um, giant buckwheat things, this is a rosy buckwheat. Rosy buckwheats are excellent, wonderful little plants, gorgeous, except when they die back. When they die back, they look really, really fugly. So I used to have a lot more rosy buckwheats, and I actually moved them all around to the back because, well, they are excellent. I don't think they're street side plants, except right here, it seems to do excellent. And I attribute that to the fact that we are right underneath a street light right here. So I think the rosy buckwheat gets more light right here, and it's also got a good spot right here. So I'm like, you know, we'll just let that particular, which did not actually get planted there, it was a volunteer over there. Rosy buckwheats will also plant themselves anywhere and everywhere. This is a chaparral mallow, and so far so good with the chaparral mallow. I have had people ask me, so hasn't it escaped and gone everywhere? It has not escaped and gone everywhere. I attribute that to, like as with the other mallows over there, I think it explodes by seed, and as long as you have a good mulch path down, it will not actually seed out everywhere. If it does explode everywhere, you know what? This is in a sidewalk area. This is fine. It's already kind of restrained in an area, and I wish it was in full blossom. You can see it at some other point because this is a gorgeous, gorgeous one, and I actually appreciate the fact that it is growing so well in this little patch of no man's land, because it's super hard to get things that grow really well on that little section of path right in between the sidewalk and the street, where you will have cars parking, and you need to be able to have people able to open their doors, step out, and you provide paths, but people will do it anywhere, and you need them to be able to survive that, and you need to be able to have zones that do it. That is non-native. It is a strawberry tree. It is a cousin to madrone. So I'm like, it celebrates the look of the manzanita, but madrones would not do well as a street tree. They have sort of delicate root systems until they get really established. So, and I needed a street tree. It is actually a requirement to have street trees. So strawberry tree, it's a non-native cousin, but it does well enough right there, celebrates the same look, and does well in the area. And that is State of the Garden Front Yard 2025.